Okay, I got it. Okay, Dr. Haley Gemara Maiter. Mati in the picture. Believe me that someone's here. Otherwise, I think no one's here. Patrick Epis. Okay, now you have Mati. Dr. Haley Gemara. So we're talking about the different inks and the different papers that are used to write the Sefer Torah. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that today is the yahrzeit of Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, who in large part is responsible for Klal Yisrael surviving the Haskalah. So it's his yahrzeit. I believe today is Chav Zayin, right? Is it Chav Zayin or Chav Ches? I think today is Chav Zayin.
Chav
Zayin, right? And it's also the Yeshiva of Elyameir Bloch, the Yeshiva of Telz. No, I'm sorry, that's tomorrow. Tomorrow's Shmuel Birnbaum. It's a Pinchas Hirschberg, that's right. I should have remembered because they had an article about him this week in the Pirchei thing. So it's a Pinchas Hirschberg's yahrzeit who was able to easily pass the pin test. Is your grandfather Yosy as well? Oh, your mother's. What's his name? Yosy Chaim Ben. Oh, so Yosy's in that room. So I remember Pinchas Hirschberg used to come to Bill Yurt because he used to come to the Jungers for Shabbos. And I remember that one year he came and he spoke for us. So usually the summertime is El. So he said, we're coming into El, we're coming into Yom Neroim, and what do we daven for? We daven for the Rebbeinu Shem should give us Yerushalayim, the Chein Tein Tachtacha. So he looked around and says, Rabbi, anyone here who comes to shul, do you come to shul thinking, oh, hey, Rebbeinu Shalom, I have such a deficit of Yerushalayim, please, I need Yerushalayim. Is that really what you're all davening for? What pshat that we daven for Chein Tein Tachtacha? That was a Hirschberg's question. So he answered, Tachtacha is the gematria. What's the gematria Tachtacha? Pei is 80, Chaf is 20, and Ches is 8, and Dalal is 12. Right? So it's 112. Tachtacha is gematria 112. Gelt is also gematria 112. So that's right of the Chein Tein Tachtacha. That's what the Rav Hirschberg said. And I remember the other story that Rav Hirschberg didn't say, but Dave Younger said it over, is that there was a person in a Hirschberg's Kehillah that was beating his wife. So Rav Hirschberg had to do something about it. So Hirschberg calls him in and says, is it true that you beat your wife? He says, yes, Rabbi, of course. So he says, but how could you do that? Don't you love your wife? So he says, Rabbi, let me ask you a question. Do you love your children? He says, of course I do. Do you ever hit them? He says, yes. Well, I love my wife. I hit her too. That was the story that Dave Younger said over about an incident that happened with his father-in-law. Doesn't necessarily mean that it happened, but a good story doesn't happen. You're on mute.
Can one daven for to be a Yerushalayim? A kol b'dei Shemayim chutz me Yerushalayim, right? So what's the point of davening for that?
It could be that's why Pastor the Gematria Geld.
Okay.
Our money also represents Yerushalayim. What do we do with it? We do mitzvahs, we get tzedakah. So we daven for parnasa. But what do we do with the parnasa? We give it right back to the bunch. Okay, so Sam is Sama. What is Sam that the Mishnah refers to? It's Sama. Sikra, what is Sikra that the Mishnah refers to? Omer Rabba Bar Bar Chana Sakarta. Shema, it's called Sakarta. So Rashi tells us these things, I don't know what they mean. Sama is Zarnayich, Loshna Kodesh, or for Mintave Balas. So I'm not sure what it is. If anybody's an English art scroll, maybe there's a word there that we use it that we might even recognize.
Orpiment, whatever that is.
So we don't recognize it anyway. Okay, we'll put it in the Chaloy Glagos pile. We'll put it in the pile with the meaning of Chaloy Glagos. Okay, Sakarta is Tseva Adam. That we at least have an inkling. It's red ink. The Megillah has to be written in black and not in red. Even though come Purim time, everybody has a lot of red ink after a long winter and giving tzedakahs, so there's a lot of red ink, but it should be written in black ink. Tseva Adam should say by treason. They would dye shields red. I guess if you're shooting an arrow, try to aim for my shield, and if it's red, you'll be able to see it better. Okay. Kumus, what is kumus? It's kuma. And Rashi says that's sraf elon, that's some type of sap of some tree. Whatever it is, these are not good to be used as ink. Kuntoim is charta de ushpechi, and Rashi says that's a sam shetzoivim by minol mishchorim. So it's black ink and they use it to dye black shoes. Diftera, now we're switching over into papers. Diftera is the meliach ukamiach v'loy office. The way they made parchment, we watched a video on it in Masechet Shabbos, is they take the rawhide and they salt it, and that salt takes out all of its moisture to dry it out. And then after they salt it, they put it into some type of solution that's got to be relatively corrosive, because that's designed to get all the hair off. And then they would stretch it. So they would connect it to like clothespins on a frame and stretch it. And they would take like a metal straight edge and scrape it down to get all the goo off, so that it remained as nice, clean parchment. So malich is salted, kamich, it's soaked in a flour solution. The loy offits, but it's not scraped. So that's what difter is, and it wouldn't work. Niyar, what is paper? Mechka. Rashi's mechka is made out of grasses, which is what we do. We grind up different types of grasses, and then we put them into a frame. If anybody ever went to the science center, they actually have a paper making station where basically you get pulp and it's in a water solution, and they give you a frame with a strainer on it that you put into the water, you lift up, so the strainer gets full of the pulp, and then once it dries, it actually becomes a piece of paper. So Tosfos asks, if loy ofitz means that it's possible as a sefer morning shmiel, im kain fact there's a heich koisnal klafim shalonu. The klafim that we use, I guess that they used in Tosfos' times, the loy afitzi, they were not scraped. Say Torah Tefillin and Megillah, how could you write with them? So Rabbeinu Tam answered that sometimes you can accomplish whatever the scraping, the manual scraping, you can accomplish with a stronger solution. So instead of elbow grease, use a stronger solution. The solution that we soak our klafim into, mahani kafat, they work so well that they'll, even without scraping, it comes off. Zog to Gemara Baita. Ksuva ashuris. Until the ksav is ashuris. How do you know that it has to be written in ashuris? Zog to Hey Gemara. It has to be exactly like the ksiva. Ala sefer v'diyai. Minola. How do you know that all four have to be written with the right ink and on the right parchment? Also ksiva ksiva. We have a gzeir shava from the word ksiva to the word ksiva. Ksiva chavatikas of Esther Amalka. So you see this ksiva referring to our Megillah. Ksivasam v'yoyim lahem baruch. Baruch was the cipher of the Navi. V'yoyim baruch mipiv yikare elai. It's called var me'ela. V'anikosev ala sefer ubedayai. So you see that ksiva means ala sefer ubedayai, and from there we can learn to other ksivas that that's what it means. Zot the Mishnah. Travel. Ben Ir shaholach l'krach. You lived in a city. The Rashi says, so your time was supposed to be day 14, and you went to a krach. I guess you moved there, or you went there, you traveled there before day 14, or maybe after day 14. We'll see what it means. And he went to a city where they lane on day 15. Or v'chein krach shaholach l'ir. Or if you have someone who normally lanes Megillah on day 15, so someone from Yerushalayim went to Bnei Brak for day 14, and he's there in the evening. So he's there in the evening of the 14th or the evening of the 15th, depending on whether you were talking about the first case of the Mishnah or the second case. Im osad lachsalim koimot. If he's not going to be in that city, whether it's the Yerushalayim city, which lanes on day 15, or the Bnei Brak city, which lanes on day 14, if he's going to leave at night, he's not going to be there for the morning. He sticks to his own schedule. The imlav, but if he's going to be there for the next morning, then kair iman, then he reads with them. So this is a little bit complex. So let's see Rashi, who gives us more detail, which is imperative to when they come, when they leave. So zokt the Gemara, zokt Rashi, kair kim kaimai, chayvas mekaimai. So if he's a ben Ir, if he's from Bnei Brak, bar ba'asar, if he's a ben krach, b'chamish asar. Well, actually, the Gemara is going to, it's not Rashi, the Gemara that's going to elaborate. So let's see the Gemara. But first, we have to finish the Mishnah. We had this just yesterday. How much of the Megillah do you have to read? You have to read the whole thing. You can start in the middle. Like we do. You have to learn the whole Megillah. Yehuda Omer, Mi-Ish Yehudi. You have to start from Ish Yehudi. So you might ask, so the Noy Bezoi, why is the Megillah, why do we start writing the Megillah from the beginning? Why don't we should only start writing the Megillah from Ish Yehudi? So we learned yesterday, which quoted the Gemara that we learned today, is that even though you start learning from Ish Yehudi, the Megillah as written has to be complete. You just don't have to read the whole thing. So if you had a Megillah that only started from Ish Yehudi, it would be possible. Abi Yosy Omer from Achar Advar Meila. I'm sorry? Yeah, but the whole thing starting from Ish Yehudi. Yeah. That's what we never heard of that because we passed like a mayor all the years. And then Rabbi Yosy who holds you talk to Hamam from Achar Advar Meila Gidul Abelcha from Shlosh Home.
This is saying only in the case where he's reading it in a place that he doesn't normally live.
No, this is a completely new subject. It has nothing to do with someone who's traveling. As far as I know,
Just to clarify, the Mishnah says kare, read, right? So we're not talking about writing, we're talking about reading.
correct. And the Gemara will say, and we learned it yesterday, that even though there are shittas like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosy who hold you don't have to read the whole Megillah, but they both agree that it has to be written. And you read part of it, but the whole Megillah has to be written. And we'll see that in the Gemara. So let's focus now, because now we get into a little bit of a complex arrangement over here. So let's see. I'm going to position my camera so I have the Rashi on the Gemara here, and let's see the Gemara. Amar Rava, Lo Shanu. This that we say that you read Kimakoimoi if Asad Lachser Limkoimoi is Elisha Asad Lachser Belela Yudal. So you have this Ben Tesvav, someone from Yerushalayim went to Bnei Brak, and he's there Purim night. If he's planning to leave in the middle of the night and get home for the morning, which means he's not going to be there for a whole Purim day, he's just there for the evening, then he doesn't have to go to shul in Bnei Brak the night of Purim. He could just go home and he'll hear the full Megillah at night and by day, on day 15, when he gets back to Yerushalayim. This fellow went from Bnei Brak, from Yerushalayim to Bnei Brak. And he's not planning to come back at night. He's planning to stay there for the day as well. He wants to be there for the day. Maybe he'll come back in the afternoon. So then Kairi Moin. If he's spending the full day 14 with them, so if someone from Yerushalayim goes to Bnei Brak, and in fact, Yeshiva Bracham do this every single year because they want to have 2 Purims, they'll go to Bnei Brak, they'll stay there the night of the 14th and the day of the 14th, and they're 100% mechuyev to participate in the Megillah learning on the day 14th. But if they only went for the night and they came back at night, they wouldn't be there for the morning, then they would not have to go to Megillah learning at night.
If he stays for the day and he has to ling, and then he goes back home, does he have to do it again?
I'm not sure. Let's see Rashi. Zok Rashi. And when I say let's look at Rashi, I'm not just pushing you off. I don't remember if Rashi specifically addresses this. He addresses it the other way around when day 14 goes to day 15. So let's see what Rashi says. Im koidim amar shachar yetze min ha'ir. Only if this person from Yerushalayim went to Bnei Brak and he's going to leave before daybreak of Purim day, then hu dekatani she'enei tzarech likrei simon b'leili yadal. Then he doesn't have to go to Megillah the night before either. He can go around collecting while everyone else is sitting by the Megillah. Afal pi she'edenu sham, even though he's still there, meaning in the evening while they're letting the Megillah, since he's not going to be there for the morning laning, he's not considered a person who lives in a regular city even for the day. There's a concept of prus ben yoyma. You could be a person who for the day is a prus, but that's only if you're there both for the evening laning and for the morning. But if you leave at night before the morning laning, then you're not even called a ben yoyma, so you have no chiv whatsoever to hear Megillah laning on the 14th day. You'll go home and you'll do your regular Purim on day 15. But if this fellow from Yerushalayim went to Bnei Brak and he's planning to stay overnight, the has to have a peruz la'oisayoy. So now for the day, he's a person who lives in an unwalled city. Even though he's planning to go back to Yerushalayim tomorrow, nikra peruz. He's still called a peruz. The kayr imoyin bein belayla yudalad bein beyudalad. One second, I'm not reading it. If he's not planning to leave at night, right? Even if he's planning to go back in the middle of the day, he's called a prus for the day. And therefore, for today, he has to act like he lives in Bnei Brak. What about the opposite? Who didn't live in ear? Shahalach Lakrach. What if your normal day is your Dalit? So you live in Bnei Brak, and you went to Yerushalayim. So, which means clearly you have already learned the Megillah last night, and you already learned Megillah this morning, because you're leaving Purim afternoon to head. You're going Purim afternoon to Yerushalayim. So you've already done your Purim in Bnei Brak, and now Purim afternoon you come to Yerushalayim. So if you're just going for Purim night to Yerushalayim, then he's not planning to stay for the day of Purim. So then he's not considered like today he lives in a city that's surrounded with a wall. And that's why his chiyuv was Yudalit, and that's where he laid. He doesn't have to lay the kid on Tesla. Even though right now, Purim night, he's in Yerushalayim, and right now in Yerushalayim everyone's laying, he doesn't have to. If he's planning to stay overnight in Yerushalayim, then he won't need to lay on Yudalit. Meaning, even if he here's
Does he know for sure he's going to go? His plan is to go. Things might change.
I'm not sure. So this must mean he's from Rashi it's mashma that I'm wrong. He was already in Yerushalayim on day 14. He was there a couple of days earlier. And the question is, am I considered a person of Bnei Brak, and therefore I'll have to find a minion in Yerushalayim that's Elena Yudalit, because my chiyuv is Yudalit, or can I just forget Yudalit and lay on Tesvav? So the Mishnah tells us it depends. If you're planning to stay overnight, then you can lay on Tesvav, you don't have to lay on Yudalit. But if you're not planning to stay overnight, then you have to lay on Yudalit. And therefore, so Modi is asking me what happens if there's a change of plans. That's a good question. But we're talking about, these are your plans, then this is what you do. So if your plan was...
He was ready in Yerushalayim when he done. What happens if he wasn't Yerushalayim?
Well, then he laid already.
He knows that he's going to go for Tesla.
It doesn't matter, because today he's a Purus B'Yoyma. Whenever you're in a city for the night, and that's a good rule to stick to. Whenever you're going to be in a city, doesn't make a difference if it's a Mekabas Chaima or if it's non-Mekabas Chaima. If you're going to be in that city for the night and for the day, no matter what will happen and no matter what happened, whether you're planning to lane, whether you didn't lane yet, doesn't make a difference. If you're in any city for the night and for the day, you're mechuyev to act like you live in that city, and you're mechuyev to hear Megillah. The whole shaila comes out if you're only planning to be there for the night and not for the day. And then we say you're considered like you live in your original city. So that is Allah. So let's
Isn't
get back
it possible you have to hear Megillah, right? But you could theoretically avoid the chiyuv by going to a city, going to Bnei Brak on the 15th, staying in Yerushalayim and then going to Bnei Brak, and you would never be mechuyev. Isn't that possible?
Well, let's pick an exact case. The whole day 14, you stayed in Yerushalayim. The whole day 14, you stayed in Yerushalayim, right? Now, are your plans to go back for day 15, or your plans are to stay? If your plans are to go back, even if you want to go back tonight and night of that 15th, you're mechuyev to lay on Yudalit.
Okay.
In Yerushalayim, you'll have to find yourself a minion.
Okay.
The only way it could happen is if you were planning to stay overnight, and then you changed your mind.
Yeah.
So then you didn't lay on Yudalit, you didn't Tesvav. For that, you got to ask a rabbi.
Right. So this goes to the change of plans problem. I think that like Multi was bringing up it goes by your plans as opposed to where you are when the chiyuv is chal.
Well, it has to
You're
go
never
by
in a place. I guess you could make yourself that you're never in a place that the chiyuv is chal.
But the reason why it has to go by your plans is you're a person from Bnei Brak whose normal chiyuv is Yudalit. You come on Tainis Esther. You come to Yerushalayim. Okay. So the question is, are you supposed to lay Megillah tonight or not? It has to be in your plan. If your plan is to stay through the day of the 15th, then you don't have to lay Megillah tonight, 14th. If your plan is to go back before the day of the 15th, then you have to lay on Yudalit. What if you change your plans? That's not the scope of the Mishnah. So I'm not sure what would happen. We're discussing based on your plans.
Do we see anywhere else that you do a mitzvah based on your plans counter to what everybody else around you is doing?
Because the question is who are you? Are you a dweller? Are you a dweller? Are you a dweller of an open city, or are you a dweller of a city with walls? So the rule is technically you're a dweller of the city that you come from. The only exception is that if you're there for the day and the night of Purim, then we give you the status as if you live in that city as well.
Interesting. So it's not just that the chiyuv is on. It's not just that people in a walled city lane it on Tesvav. It's that people who come from a walled city lane it on
Also,
Tesvav. Right. So it's okay. I'm just trying to understand. Is it on the place or is it on the person? It sounds like it's really on the person.
Like that. Torah telling that because if you are planning to return, if I'm in Yerushalayim, but I live in Bnei Brak, and I'm not planning to be there for the day of the 15th, even though on the 14th day I'm in Yerushalayim, and there's no chiyuv to lane in Yerushalayim, I'm a chiyuv to lane because I come from Bnei Brak. Good.
Yeah.
So, Dubi, what did you ask? Now that we went through Rashi and the Gemara, I forgot what you asked.
I asked, so if he's from a place that does it on the 15th and he went to a place that does it on the 14th and he was there for the day and he did it already.
So let me hold you. I gotta hold you. You're going too fast for me. I live in Yerushalayim.
I live in a place where they do it on the 15th. I go to a place. I live in Yerushalayim. I go outside Yerushalayim.
When do I go to? What day do I?
Before the 14th, or
I go on time.
I'm there on the night of the 14th, and I stay for the date of the 14th. So I'm
You have to lane on the 14th.
So then I go back home.
You have to lane
it again. You have to lane it again.
Okay. I think you do because
whenever
you're in the city for the whole day, you're identified at least for that day as a member.
Even if you're already to the mitzvah.
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. Yeah. So let's see what the Gemara says. Michte. Ksiv ha-Yehudim. I'm sorry. Let's go back. Amar Rava, how do I know this halacha? Rashi, and this is what everyone is struggling with. If I live in Bnei Brak or I live in Yerushalayim, why do we say that just because I was in Yerushalayim for one day, the day of Purim, or Bnei Brak for the day of Purim, that suddenly for that day I take on an identity as if I live in that city? The Chsivit says, Al-Kena Yehudim ha-prozim, ha-yoshvim b'ari ha-prozis, which is a little bit of doublespeak. Michti, the pasuk says, ha-Yehudim ha-prozim. So when it says ha-Yehudim ha-prozim, it's obvious that they are prozim because they live in Ari ha-prozis. Why did the pasuk repeat itself a second later? The Yehudim ha-prozim that live in the Ari ha-prozis, that double lotion is hakamash malon, the pruz ben yoymei nikvah. It's a chiddush in halacha. Why should you, spending one day in that place, give you a status of that day? You live in another city. If just because I've come to Yerushalayim for the day, now I'm a Yerushalmi, I live in Bnei Brak. The teretz is, we have a special book that tells you that for the Gabi Purim, if you're in Ari ha-Prozi for one day, if you're in Bnei Brak for one day, the day of Purim, so then you have to take on the halachas of Purim of Bnei Brak while you're there. So we know that you're considered a Pruzi if you live in a Bnei Brak for one day. But Mukaf Minolan, how do you know it's the opposite? How do you know if I come to Yerushalayim that I didn't have Mukaf Shchaimer for one day? So come on, that's a svarahu. The paras ben yoymei karu paras. Mukaf ben yoymei karu mukaf. If we're going to say that if you're there for that day, you get the status of that city for that day, it should go both ways. Logically, it should go both ways. Okay, now we have another set of parameters. What about Ben Kfar? A Ben Kfar, the etzem his chiv is on Yudalit, but he has a kula that he could be makdim l'yoy machnisa. So what happens if a Ben Kfar shaholach later? So this Ben Kfar laned, let's say Purim was Tuesday, and he laned on Monday because he was makdim l'yoy machnisa. And then he happened to be in the city anyway of Purim, right? We don't want to betrayach them, but he was in the city for Purim. So Ben Kfar shaholach later, Ben kach ubenkach koira imon. Regardless, he lanes with them, even if he's only there for the night. And Rashi says, Benkach, afilu osad lachsav elotish misham, koidim hayoim, korimon belayla. So again, you had a person from Akfar who laned on Monday, and then Monday night he was in the city, which was the evening of Tuesday. Even though he's planning to leave before Tuesday morning, and he's not going to be there in the morning, he still lanes with them Monday night. My timer, what's the reason? Because technically, he's really a ben ir. Really, his chiv is on Yom Yudalit. For Abbanan Huda Akilu ala Kfarim Kadesh Yispeku Maimu Mosam Lachem Shabbat. They were makel. We're not going to be matriach them to make a special trip to come in. But Hanimile, he's if he's in his village, we're not going to trouble him to come in. But if he's here anyway, and we're not troubling him, Kivnei ir boy lemikri. Surely he should be mechuyev to lane on his designated day. Frektigamor Esau Abaye. So Abaye has a kasha on Rav. Ben krach shaholach leir. The Brisa says ben krach shaholach leir. This is not our Mishnah. Ben kach ubenkach korim kimkoima. But that doesn't make any sense. Ben krach sol kedaitach. How could you say ben kach ubenkach korim koima? That's a direct steer to our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says so kedaitach bim osad lachsa tolim milsa. Our Mishnah says it all depends on whether or not you're going to be there for the morning as well. So what is shot in this Brisa that I quoted? Ben krach shalach leir ben kach ubenkach korim kimkoima. Elalav. The only way you can possibly explain this is say that it's not speaking about a ben krach that came to a ear. You have to say it's a ben kfar. It must be a ben kfar that came to the ear. And then it says ben kach ubenkach korim koima, meaning he doesn't have to lane Megilla with the people in the city, since he already laned yesterday. He doesn't have to lane again. So this is a direct contradiction to what Rava said. So tomorrow, Rava says, how could you ask me a kasha? You introduced a brisa and you had to edit it because you said it was mistaken. So if you're going to edit it and change it from ben krach to ben kfar, then I could also edit it. And I'll say tani kari moin. I'll change the halach. Instead of saying kari kimkoimoy, I'll say kari moin. Once you're bringing me a brisa and you're editing it because you know it's mistaken when they obey, so then I can edit it too. Tanya, so now we have a fourth sheet. Even later on, from Balaylahu, not the Shnas HaMelech. All of the different sheetas as to where you start laying the Megillah, all are interpreting the same pasuk differently. It says, "Vatichasav Esther Amalka uMordechai Yehudi es kol toikef." They wrote the entire toikef. Manda Amar, the strength. Manda Amar Kula. The Manda Amar learns that you say the whole Megillah, Reb Meir, our shita, is toikfoi shel Achashverosh. The toikef that they wrote about was the strength of Achashverosh. So it starts off discussing Vayibi Achashverosh, starts off talking about the malchus of Achashverosh and his glory. Manda Amar Mishahudi, and the Mandama who holds that you start from Mishahudi, it's toikfoi shel Mordechai. That the kol toikef that Esther was talking about was the strength of Mordechai. Held toikfoi shel Haman, it's writing about the strength and then the decline of Haman. It's talking about toikfoi shel Neis, because that was when the event started to take a turn for the better. It's from a different pasuk where they argue about. It says umaro al kacha umagi alei. So if you look into the pasuk, it's a very interesting pasuk. That it says over here, Alkain Karli Yom Eila Purim, Al Shem Apur, Alkain, Al Kol Divrei Ager says, what did they see? What did people see that caused them to do certain things? And what was the results of the things that they did? So it's very general. Something happened, there was a catalyst that caused someone to do something, and after they did something, there was a result. So there's a very general comment. So we're going to see how it's interpreted. Mandar Makula, the Mandar holds the whole Megillah. Mara Achashverosh. The Mara is, what does Achashverosh see to make his mistakes in the Shtamish Bekelim Shalbeis HaMikdash? Al Kacha, what did he see? He made a wrong calculation of 70 years and thought that the Gula was no longer going to come. And what was the result of that? The Katal Vashti, that Vashti got killed. Mandamar Meishahudi, we would say, Mara Mordechai, the Ikni Bahaman. Why did Mordechai Chabrizach Haman? Al Kacha, the Shavan Av Shabbat Dezara, because Muhammad made himself a Shabbat Dezara, and Mordechai had to protest that. Magi Alayim, what was the result? This Rachash Nisa. The question is, Haman should niskana the Chala Yehudim. Why did Haman decide that he wants to kill all the Jews? Al Kacha, because Mordechai refused to bat him. Magi Alayim, what was the result? The Tala Oisai, the Esban of Alaitz. The question will be, why did Achashverosh spontaneously decide to look into the Sefer HaShachraynos? It's Al Kacha. There's a minte Esther la Haman Badei, because Esther invited Haman, which caused Achashverosh to be concerned that maybe they're planning a coup. Magi Aleim, this Rachash Nisa, we had a nice because of that. We pass like a mayor who says you have to say the entire Megillah. V'yafilu l'man da'amar me'ish Yehudi, Even if you hold that you only have to start from Yeshua, just because you don't have to read the whole Megillah, the entire Megillah does have to be written. Otherwise, it's possible. Megillah Nikras Sefer. The Megillah is called a Sefer, which would mean it should have all the halachas of a Sefer Torah, but also the Nikra Geras, which means it doesn't have the halachas of a Sefer Torah. So it's somewhere in the middle. So how do you explain its status? Nikra Sefer Shem Tafer B'chutei Pishtam Psula. When you tie together the panels of the cloth of a Sefer Torah, it can't be tied together with flax. It has to be tied together with sinews. So to the Megillah has to be tied together in the same fashion. The Nikras Geras, but it's called the Geras Shem Hitel B'Shloisha Chutei Gidin Sheira. You don't have to have many stitches. In the Sefer Torah, there's going to be a series of stitches, maybe 10 stitches from the top to the bottom of the panel, joining the two panels. By the Megillah, you only need 3 stitches. They have to be even. And there's machlokes to show you what this means. Rashi holds what it means is the space between the top of the panel and the first stitch where you put the needle through to tie them together has to be equal in distance to the space in between the 3 stitches, which is 2 more spaces, and then the space below the last stitch also has to be the same amount. So you're basically splitting the Megillah up into 4. So let's say it's 12 inches high. There'll be 4 sets of 3 inches, and at the 3-inch mark, the needle goes into the hole, and then it comes out at the 6-inch mark and goes back in the 9-inch mark, and that's how it's tied together. But the top 3 inches and the bottom 3 inches would be left not tied. That's how Rashi learns. Other Rishonim learn that the space above and below isn't the same size as the space in between. It's a little bit smaller. It's about half of that, so it's spaced out a little differently.
Lamaisa, what do we do?
I'm sorry.
Lamaisa, what do we do?
How do I do our Megillas?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'll have to look at a Megillah and see. But I don't know if that's how it that's how it has to be done. Actually, I don't know. I have to check a Megillah. I should have pulled out my Megillah and checked. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Hakara Megillah, Haksuva bein Haksuvim. What if you didn't have the Megillah by itself? You had a large scroll that had all of the Tanakh in it, like the big sefer we have upstairs. But what if that was in a scroll and you just mishoif to Megillah Esther and you start learning from there? The halach is lo yotza. You're not going to be yotza. Why? Rashi says the ba'inoni geras la'atzma. It has to be its own geras. The mefarsam nisa tfei. If it's a Megillah Esther only, it's not part of the rest of the Tanakh. It's more of a Peshuvah Nisa. The chikaya ben aksuvim mikra kakar b'mikra. If he's just reading one section out of a larger book, it doesn't look like he's focusing on a mix. That's only, in a typical Sefer Torah or Megillah, every panel is the same height. Imagine if you had 2 panels that were 3 inches bigger or 3 inches smaller, they would stick out. So if you had all of Tanakh written in one big scroll, but by Megillah Esther, the pages were either bigger or smaller, then it's not a problem. Because of course it would once again be very noticeable that it's a Megillah. That's something special. Levi bar Shmuel have a kakari kamei de Rabbi Yehuda ben Megillah. Levi, the son of Shmuel, was the Balkaira in front of Rabbi Yehuda in this type of Megillah. The Megillah Aksuva ben Aksuvim. It was a Megillah that was written as part of the Tanakh. Amalei told him, "Hari Amar Akari ben Megillah Aksuva ben Aksuvim lo yotza." I thought you're not yotza. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Hakari ben Megillah Aksuva ben Aksuvim lo yotza. Umachal Amos. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba said. So the first question they asked him, "Are you not yotza?" So Rabbi Chia said over. Rabbi Chia said, "Rabbi Yochanan, there is takas such halacha. Hakari ben Megillah Aksuva ben Aksuvim that is lo yotza." But Umachal Amoicha, he then hit the halacha on its head. In other words, he undid the halacha. You thought we have a hard and fast rule that if it's a Megillah Ksuvim and Ksuvim not Yaitza, he defanged and made the halacha much less stringent, because he said B'tzibur Sham. This whole halacha is only B'tzibur. If you're learning the Megillah privately at home, it doesn't make a difference. You know what you're doing. It's not Peshuvah Nisa for the whole item. You're only not Yaitza if this is in shul. If it's in shul v'rabim, only then are you not Yaitza. So Machal means he hit the halacha on its head because he suddenly made the halacha only be relevant to tzibur. Shir hatzfar halacha l'Moshe Messina. Rashi says when you sew the panels of the Sefer Torah together, you always leave over some empty space on top and some empty space on bottom, and that you have to do that is halacha l'Moshe Messina. And then after Rabbi said the halachas, Rabbi quotes a lot of halachas, and then he knocks them off. So the first halach he knocked off was the Megilla Aksuvim and Aksuvim. Now he has another halach. You always have to leave some untied cloth on top and on bottom. And then he undid halach, and he said, no, it's not halach l'Moshe Sinai. This is not a halach l'Moshe Sinai. The reason why you leave that space at the top and the bottom open is because that will reduce the likelihood of the Torah tearing. And Rashi explains, if you over tighten it, it could tear. But if you leave a space on top and the bottom that's not part of the seam, and you start over tightening the rest of it, it'll force the top to separate. So this way you have a good way to know of when you've tightened it enough and when you have to stop tightening. We know that Moshe wanted to see the covenant of Hashem, and Hashem put him into a nikras atzur. He put him into a cave, and Hashem said, "I'm going to go by." So that was so sealed up. I don't know if anybody remembers when we looked in Eretz Yisrael. If we wanted to sleep 3 days straight because we were tired, we would close the tris, and it would be darker than Choshech Mitzrayim in our rooms when the tris was closed. So Zok, and that's how dark it was in the cave where Moshe was and Eliyahu was when Hashem showed himself. So if there would have been even Kamolim Nek of Machat, Sidakis, if there would have been that tiny little hole where a drop of light could have pierced through, they would not have been able to survive. No person, no human could see the Rebbeinu Shalom's presence, essence, and live. It says in the pasuk, talking about the luchos that Moshe brought down. Let's have a look at the pasuk where it says that. Let me see if I can find it over here. It says, "Vayitein Hashem Elai eshnei luchos v'avodim ksuvim betz v'lakim v'aleim on the luchos kol advarim asher tiba Hashem imachem bahar mitoich eish b'yoyim hakol." So what were written on these luchos? Melamid sharei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe diktukei Torah. All of the diktukim, Rashi's ribuyim, esin, gamin, miutin, achim, barak, and all of the diktukim from the Torah, v'diktukei soifrim, which means shediktu achroinim miloshan mishnah sarishan. Meaning this is even the second stage of the Mishnayos and the Gemara. And umasha soifrim asidim lachadish. And also were included in the Torah that Moshe got was the addition that the soifrim would add. What would the soifrim add later on? Umayniu mikra Megillah. Mikra Megillah was added. The mitzvah of Mikra Megillah was added to the list of mitzvahs. Zok Teilig Mishnah.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding this. What is written on the luchos? You're saying the Gemara is saying that
It says,
the mitzvahs of Purim are written on
the luchos was written everything that Hashem discussed with Moshe and Har Sinai.
Okay, I don't see how there's room for that, but that's besides the point.
Oh,
But how
on the
can,
luchos, all that print, you mean?
what? Yeah. So
Yeah,
how
how do
could
Microfiche.
microfiche? Okay, but what about things that haven't happened yet in like the Purim issues?
Well, that's what it says. Even that was on there.
How could that be on there? How could anyone know what it's talking about?
Well,
I mean, what did they do when they learned that?
HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed this to Moshe, so I'm not sure exactly. Maybe Moshe knew. Maybe he didn't share with everybody. I don't know. Like Shmuel said, Moshe read all the fine print, and he signed on the bottom line. Is it possible that Moshe knew about it because Hashem taught it him, but he didn't give it over to Klal Yisrael? But then, how does that leave room for a new takana of the Anshe Knesset Agdola? Vice versa, Hashem told Moshe the Anshe Knesset Agdola are going to make this new takana. And it could be Moshe felt maybe I shouldn't say it now; it's too overwhelming for them. Let it come out slowly. Like you said, the taicha was enough to do him in. I'm not going to give him any
It's
more.
also it also creates a huge problem of free will because
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. That's the old question.
That's right. Shmuel said, when you click I agree at the end of the software license, at the bottom, before you turn anything on, there it is. 'Cause
Oh,
that's
you
my
know,
code.
it's just like you're saying, just like we don't read the EULA, nobody actually read this part. So it was okay. We just clicked agree.
Hakol sharing from Megilla, Hakol sharing liquors from Megilla. Anybody can be a balkar for the Megillah. Chutz mecheresh shoyt of the cut, except for a cheresh, a shoyt in the cut. So right away, the cheresh could be ein shemeh, but he has to be medaber. And normally, a cheresh is ein shemeh, ein medaber. If he's ein medaber, he can't play the Megillah. So this means even a cheresh that cannot hear but could speak, even such a cheresh cannot
So a woman is okay?
shoyt of the cut.
A woman is okay?
That's what it says, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a woman could learn Megillah. I don't know if she could be much a man. We had it for sure for a woman.
Like be might say man.
Whether or not she can be much a man, that was we had a shayla. We said no at the end. But Avada, she could get, yeah. Rabbi Yehuda machshir b'katan. I'm sorry?
Never hear that, but they-
I mean, yeah, because you never hear that a lady makes a barbecue either. There's certain things that men do. Rabbi Yehuda machshir b'katan. Rabbi Yehuda is machshir with a katan. So man tana cheresh the eved nami loy. So we're making an assumption that the Tanakama of our Mishnah is saying chutz mecher shoyed the cotton that b'di eved you're not yotze, and if Yehuda says by a cotton you are yotze. So assuming that the beginning of the Mishnah means that even b'di eved you're not yotze, if a cher shoyed the cotton lanes, who is the author of this Mishnah? Amar Masna Rabbi Yosy, it would be Rabbi Yosy. It's now we learn Hakara Shema. So we're comparing the mitzvah of Kriya Shema to Kriya Megillah. Hakara Shema. And you didn't hear anything that you said, Yotza, you'll be Yotza. So someone who's a Cherish cannot possibly hear what he's saying. So it's automatically by default, and therefore Rabbi Yosy told you not Yotza. So therefore, the Mishnah at the beginning that says, Chutz Mecheresh is going according to Rabbi Yosy, because Rabbi Yosy, we know, verified, holds that a Cherish cannot learn the Megillah. How do you know it has to be Rabbi Yosy? Why are you making that assumption that the ratio of the Mishnah, where it says chutz mecher shoyed the cotton, it means that even b'di eved you're not yotze? Maybe not. Dilma Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe it's going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Ulechatchila hudaloi. And maybe when it says chutz mecher shoyed the cotton, it means lechatchila a cherish cannot lane, but b'di eved a cherish could lane. Hadi eved chaper dummy. But maybe b'di eved, even if a cherish lane, it would be good. So that's not logical. The katani cherish dum yud shoyed the cotton. Cherish is not listed on its own. It's listed together with shoyt and cotton. Ma shoyt of cotton, the eved namiloi. We're making an assumption that the shoyt of cotton is even possible the eved, and it's clearly mashma like that, at least by cotton, because it's such a bit of machshir cotton. Va'is is cotton in the ratio that Tanakama holds it to the eved loy. Av cherish the eved namiloi. So we want to be able to say that a cherish for the eved is not yotze, and therefore we say it should follow the sheet of Rabbi Yosy. Who said? Maybe cherish of the cotton, where it says they can't learn the Megillah, some of them are b'di'evet, some of them aren't. Maybe cotton is b'di'evet, but maybe cherish is not b'di'evet. Zok Gemara midekatani seifa. Rabbi Yehuda machshir b'cotton. Rabbi Yehuda argues on the ratio, and he says he's machshir b'cotton. Wouldn't that indicate that the ratio is not Rabbi Yehuda? Nachal the ratio live Rabbi Yehuda. Obviously, the ratio can't be going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda first pipes in the seifa. So the ratio must be going according to Rabbi Yehuda. I'm sorry, the ratio must be going according to Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Yosy holds that if you cannot hear what you're saying, you're not Yosy. The Bach Rashi takes out the next couple of lines, and it skips to here. The Dilma Kula Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe the whole Mishnah is following Rabbi Yehuda, but Utrei Gavni Cotton. But there's two cottons here. The Rabbi Yehuda Machshir cotton is a different cotton from what the Mishnah is discussing in the ratio of Chutz Mecher Shadu Cotton. And we need to edit and add a lot of information into the Mishnah. And it says as follows: Hakol Ksherin, Likros is a Megillah. Everybody can read the Megillah. Chutz mecheresh shoyta v'cotton. What type of cotton is possible even b'di'evet? Amedvar mamur v'cotton shaloi gilachin. A cotton that didn't even come to the level of chinuch. And Rashi says what that means is chinuch mitzvahs could go in ben tesha ben eser. He's not even 9 or 10 years old; he's 6 years old. That cotton, if he lanes, it's possible even b'di'evet. Aval v'cotton shegilachin. Omer Rabbi Yehuda at the end of the Mishnah that b'di'evet you yoytze by a cotton who's a gilachin afilu lechatchila. So I'm wrong. It's even mutar lechatchila. Shabuda machshir b'cotton, and maybe that's what the Yehuda is adding in the sefer. He's machshir he's not machshir the same cotton as before because he agrees with the ratio. He's the Tana of the ratio. And he holds that a cotton shlo yigil chinuch is possible with the Evid. But a cotton who's a yigil chinuch is kosher even the Chatzil. So okay, so that's what you want to say now. Fine. So b'mayu kimta, Rabbi Yehuda. So you're going to tell on Amish like Rabbi Yehuda, and you're saying the ratio speaking by a cotton shlo yigil chinuch, and it's the Evid it's possible. I'm sorry, the Evid it's possible by the cotton, right? And we're also going to say that the cheresh is although it's possible at chila, it's kosher with the Evid, right? Because we want to say it's going to Rabbi Yehuda, and he holds with the Evid a cheresh could lane. So let's see how that fits in with another thing Rabbi Yehuda said. Yehuda b'rei Rabbi Shimon Pazi cheresh hamedaber ve'eno shemeya torim lechatchila. You just wanted to say that Rabbi Yehuda is the Tana of the Reish of our Mishnah, who holds lechatchila cheresh cannot lend the Megilla, but by the Evid it would be good, right? That's what we want to see the Reish of the Mishnah says. But Rabbi Yehuda says that a cheresh could be torim lechatchila, meaning lechatchila a cheresh doesn't have to hear what he's saying. So who is that going to go according to? Rabbi Yehuda, the Evid in lechatchila. If you want to say it's going according to Rabbi Yehuda by making the Reish of our Mishnah be Rabbi Yehuda, you're saying that Rabbi Yehuda holds that lechatchila a cheresh cannot lay. So how could a cheresh be Torah? And if it's according to, if you want to say Rabbi Yosy, the Evid namila. Rabbi Yosy holds even with the Evid a cheresh who lanes will not be Yotze, and so too a cheresh who tries taking off truma won't be good. The Elamai. So what do you want to say? Rabbi Yehuda ba'filu lechatchila. So you want to say from this brisa that we just quoted that Rabbi Yehuda holds that a cheresh even lechatchila can do things that require amira, meaning he could say Krishma, he could lend the Megillah, and of course he can take off truma. I'm going to show you anyway you have a problem with Rabbi Yehuda. He said, "Hada Tanya, lo yivarech adam birchas hamazon belibo." Lechatchila, you should not make birchas hamazon belibo. You have to articulate the words. Then birech yatsa. But if you bench belibo, which means you clearly didn't hear what you said, you're going to be yatsa. Who will be the anonymous Tana of this price? Money. Lo Rabbi Yehuda. It won't fit in according to Rabbi Yehuda. Because you want to say that Rabbi Yehuda, even the Chatchila says a cheresh is good. Even the Chatchila, you don't have to hear what you're saying. But by Berchas Hamazon, it says that the Chatchila, you do need to know what you're saying. V'lo Rabbi Yosy. So, because Rabbi Yehuda, afilu Chatchila, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you clearly see by the case of Truma that even the Chatchila, if he can't hear, he can be Torah of Truma. Yet by Berchas Hamazon, it's only with the Evid, so that wouldn't fit. Rabbi Yosy, afilu the Evid namiloi. Rabbi Yosy, we know for a fact, holds that with the Evid you're not Yotze at all. If you're a cheresh, if you can't hear what you're saying. So there obviously has to be a third shita here. Because we have a Rabbi Yehuda who holds even the Chatchila Tzmutter, right? We've proven from this bracha of Berchas Hamazon that there's someone who holds the Chatchila it's not allowed, but with the Evid it's good. And we have Rabbi Yosy who holds with the Evid it's not good. So we need to uncover a third shita. So let's say that the brisa of Berchas Hamazon holds even the Chatchila a cheresh, or if you don't say it loud, you're Yotze. But like Kasha, Hadidei, Hadirabbe. There's Rabbi Yehuda saying his own halacha, and his own halacha is in fact that the Chatchila you don't have to hear, and you're Yotze. But Rabbi Yehuda also said over in the name of his Rebbe a different shita that the Chatchila you shouldn't, but the Evid you could. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Aimer Mishra Belash Ben Azariah Hakare Shema Tzarech Sheshmil Oznai Chatchila Shenemer Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, which tells you Hashmil Oznacha Ma Sha'ata Moitze Mipich. Rabbi Meir Aimer you don't need to. Asher Nech Mitzav Chayim Ala Levecha Acher Kavanas Haleiv Heinin Nadvar. You don't need to speak anything out. You only need to have kavanah. So no, Rabbi Meir is not relevant. So let's have a look. We wanted to say that the Tana of our Mishnah, who holds that a cheresh, lechatchila shouldn't lane, but with the Evid he could lane, we want to say that's going according to Rabbi Yehuda, right? So the Rabbi Yehuda that's going according to is not. We want to say that our Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that lechatchila, a cheresh is not supposed to lane, but the Evid he could lane. Well, Rabbi Yehuda himself holds that a cheresh even lechatchila could lane, because Rabbi Yehuda said that a cheresh lechatchila could be mafresh truma, and therefore he could say Krishma, he could do everything without hearing lechatchila. So that will not stem with our Mishnah at all, for sure not. We could say that our Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Yosy, and holds even with the Evid it's not good. Rashi says here, Rabbi Yehuda holds even lechatchila it's good, and then the shita who holds lechatchila it's not good, and with the Evid is good, like by Berchas Hamazon, that will go according to Rabbi Yehuda's Rebbe, who holds that that it's only asla chila, but the every cheresh can do it. I'm sorry.
Where do you see that in this price?
In which price?
You don't know, you should have left the design.
Because it says tzarich sheshmil ozna. L'chatchila, you're supposed to be mashmil ozna. But we also know that for the every yotze. So since it says l'chatchila, you have to be mashmil ozna. That's how you know l'chatchila. You have to be able to hear what you're saying. So we have a brisa that says that you're yotze if you didn't hear what you said. But here it clearly says that l'chatchila you do have to hear. And Reb Meir holds even l'chatchila you don't have to hear. Mati doesn't like that. That's good. So now that we just uncovered Reb Meir Shita, which I think Moti jumped on right away, now that we uncovered Reb Meir Shita, now you could say that Reb Yehuda also holds that it's only b'di eved and not l'chatchila, that a cherish is good. V'hadatani, Reb Yehuda read Reb Shimon Pazi, that Reb Yehuda read Reb Shimon Pazi said that l'chatchila they can make truma, that could be Reb Meir, that could be Reb Meir. Because we found another Shita who holds l'chatchila. Instead of saying that Reb Yehuda himself holds that l'chatchila, a cherish, could do all these things, you don't have to say that. Because you have a Meir Beferish in this brisa who says l'chatchila, you don't have to hear what you're saying. And therefore, we could stell in the Mishnah of Purim, where a cherish could be Torah l'chatchila, according to a Meir. Okay, let's stop here.